Hey Alex, I was re-examining some of the evidence and other material that has come out since January, and I gotta say, man, I think the alternative media's coverage of the status turf war that happened in January in Oregon, I think really is just it really kind of gives me pause. I mean, what do you think kind of happened there?
And so this is with regards to Burns, Oregon.
Yep.
Yeah, I also noticed the people that were keeping their mouths shut when they could have said something, making me wonder if they knew something. Like, Alex Jones made some points about there being provocateurs there, but they were like these really wild rants, like done from the studio and, not really a whole lot of information to discuss logistically how, why, the dangers. What stood out to me, I said this many times, the fact that the roads were left open, people were able to come and go. They were going to the store, they were coming and going, they were going to the meetings. I think the alternative media dropped the ball on seeing how strange that was. So, the narrative of the big, bad, spooky FBI was really built up, prior to the arrest of Pete Santilli and the supposed shooting, the closed casket funeral, LeVay Finicum, raising more questions about, if that really happened. And the reason people ask that is because when we have things like Sandy Hook, hell, some people are questioning this recent shooting in Orlando. There's also some crazy stuff out there, too. So some people don't know what's true and what's just a bunch of Dallas gold bug nonsense. But I think the alternative media, a lot of people, especially people that consume alternative media, there was a real sizable, gullible number of people that now seem to be silent. They may say that these people are heroes or martyrs, but the fact of the matter is they're screaming for other people to go down there, but they didn't go themselves. And I'll just pause right there. So, there's I think people are really set up for the next scam after this because this is a larger operation. Bundy led to the takeover. And the takeover of the refuge led to the supposed shooting of Finicum. All the while the roads are left open, communications are not shut down. And the post-Finicum shooting phase was the period where the Final Four came about. Like, this Final Four thing sounds like something out of a movie, if you ask me. And there's a lot of dynamics of this that sound like a Western. And that the whole thing was scripted for a Hollywood-consuming, McDonald's-eating population. Did I mention Coca-Cola drinking? So that's where we'll start. A lot of lack of common sense as to how this thing began, how it went on, the people involved, the criminal backgrounds of some of the main players, the stolen valor. And people are saying, I don't want to hear about this anymore. I don't care about stolen valor. Well, are they or are they not honest people? I think that ultimately is the question.
Right, and there's so many different directions, you and I can go with this. What I will just to kind of bring everybody up to speed, during and even immediately after the conclusion of what many of the anarchists are calling the status turf war, and I agree with that term for other reasons. Geez, man, Shane Radliff and I were interviewed together by Louis B. of Crotshot Radio during and after the status turf war. And it was just, Shane and I had discovered so much weird crap going on that it took us hours to basically kind of explain everything, during and afterwards. And interestingly enough, even after that last interview we did, there's been even more stuff coming out, even to the extent where, Shane's even been writing about it in detail. There's just so many weird crap going on. But let's just start with one thing. You mentioned the Final Four. So this would be after Finicum was shot, at least according to the official story, on, I believe it was January 26th. So then for the next 2 weeks or so, you have the Final Four up there at the Wildlife Refuge. basically sitting there. Oh, and as a side note, they called it Camp Finicum. So there was a little bit of a tribute there, I suppose. And it's kind of interesting because this kind of dragged on for a bit. And the main focus, of course, went away from Pete Santilli's YouTube channel because obviously he's one of the defendants now. And it went to this other YouTube channel, which was operated by David Fry, who was one of the final four. And so basically, if we fast forward 2 weeks later to the surrender. Oh, the surrender. That was its own little drama. Then we switch over to Gavin Siam's YouTube channel. And there's two videos in particular, and both of them are about 4 hours long. And it was really the second one of these, which was the morning of the surrender, when the surrenders were actually happening. And roughly about 2 hours and 9 minutes in, now you have to keep in mind, the other three had surrendered by this point. So David Fry really was the last man out. And it was during this period. Hey there?
Yes, we're back.
Okay. Yeah, so this would be during the point when David Fry is feeling suicidal. And, you know, just kind of maybe speaking from a little bit of a different perspective, I can empathize with him to a very limited degree because think about it. The kid's in a tight spot. Okay, it's basically an impossible situation and it's very deadly. And, you know, I can appreciate that. Having said that, there was one point at about 2 hours and 9 minutes in where David Fry, and I did transcribe this a little bit ahead of time because I figured the wording was important. David Fry said the following, quote, "They haven't even promised me any of my grievances against the government. They keep trampling on my First Amendment rights, and nothing's ever been touched." And then Gavin Siam, who was the one like hosting the hostage negotiation call, I guess you could describe it as, Gavin Siam then said, quote, "Your promises are not from them, your promises are from us," close quote. And that's when you could pretty much more or less hear a pin drop, at least for a little bit. Now that's rather interesting, so let's kind of break that down a little bit. What's being said here? Who is, you know, where are all the pronouns going on here? Well, when Fry is mentioning about they haven't promised me, etc., etc., he's talking about the federal government, he's talking about the FBI more specifically because there's negotiations going on right now, right? About how the surrender is going to work or if there's going to be a surrender and such. When Fry's mentioning about trampling on my First Amendment rights, he's referring to having to jury rig getting material onto his YouTube channel. That's what he's referring to, as well as some other stuff regarding, you know, cell phones and talking with the negotiators and things more along those lines. Not sure what he's referring to about ever been touched, but maybe he's saying that they're ignoring me. I mean, he did say that quite a bit elsewhere. Now let's go to what Gavin said. Your promises are not from them, your promises are from us. That's rather interesting, isn't it? So the promises that Fry had assumed were being made with the FBI, federal government more generally, were instead being made with, I think what Siam was referring to was the Patriot movement, with the Constitutionalists, with the sympathizers, presumably, of those guys up at the refuge and whatever else. And so that's rather interesting. So I guess David Fry made an assumption about whom the promises were being made with, and then it turns out, oops, let's pull out the rug from under you. Yeah, your promises were being made with a different batch of people, and then, of course, we all know how well the Patriots have been keeping their promises regarding supporting the Citizens for Constitutional Freedom, or C4CF guys, who are the folks at the refuge. And I would kind of suggest that perhaps the value of any such promises were basically worth less than zero.
Right. Yeah. The whole thing is, and I'm looking for some news updates on it, like the latest, and not seeing a whole lot. I mean, there's still stories about them in court, but, you know, for the most part, I think this is another example also, a really good example of this meme that we're seeing now, especially with Trump entering the picture, is the people versus the people. Not the people versus the government, but the people versus the people. Or certain groups being targeted. Even the people that, created the felony attacks were behind the felony attacks on Trump supporters at the Trump rally. That's another example of that. In this case, there was a narrative that fit people in a certain ideology, as well as people that have been somewhat radicalized. And I'm sorry if this language is sounding strong to some people, but there was a fair amount of, in my opinion, radicalization taking place as this was going on. When you have people like Ritzmeier and Lavoie, as well as David at the end, who I believe looks like an absolute fruitcake. In my opinion, he's no hero. He's an absolute, nutcake. Fruitcake. I watched all those videos that David put out at the end. And I cannot emphasize enough how insane, how undereducated he sounded on everything. And so, not an agent. I didn't actually see him as an agent. I saw him as someone that was kind of like, have you heard of these supposed foiled FBI terror attacks where they took a guy that was partially mentally retarded?
Yeah.
There's a story in Portland. The guy was Somali. Right. That's how I saw David. Somebody got to him, helped him out. Here, we got to get you up on this property, or we got to direct you to this property to play a role in this. Of course, he could have been a willing participant on par with Pete Santilli, where he is knowingly a part of it. But let's just say he wasn't. But what they represented was the suicide pact. Why are people getting offended when they were called the Al-Qaeda? Over 3 people that I just stated their suicide pact or suicide mission. They are willing to die. Over what? The Hammonds went to jail. Well, what are you going to build, apartment complexes? And you guys actually going to live in this wildlife refuge? I mean, that thing was totally pointless. Yeah. And then there was the social media aspect compounded that other people should join the suicide pact. And then the lack of accountability from the supporters of this whole thing. And so, wait a minute, this whole thing, everybody's been arrested, and they're going back to the Bundy people. I'll never forget 8-digit PDX on YouTube. Trying to cause me some emotional turmoil while I lived in Portland, at one point suggesting that I drive from Portland. Now, granted, I was homeless at the time, had very little money, that I physically drive my truck, which is breaking down probably at an estimated value of $1,000, 85 little Toyota pickup truck, to pick up some militia types at Bundy.
Oh.
So this person in my life, and the reason I'm sharing this because he's a microcosm of a macrocosm. He represents other lesser educated survivalists that are easily led over a cliff. This person that want to criticize my lifestyle and my raising income on my own, doing YouTube videos and fundraising, who try to bring me under his control to work for him, he was in that camp. Survivalist, so-called libertarian, liberty, and so the co-opting of the liberty movement in really obvious ways has been going on for some time, even though it really hasn't been given, ample coverage. The Tea Party thing of 2009 was another example. Sarah Palin, who are these individuals walking out on stage? What's that other lady's name? Pam Geller?
Oh, Pamela Geller,
the celebrity, get the hell out of my, she's another one. So.
Yeah, isn't she an Israeli dual citizen or something? I mean, there's something up with her.
Women are believed, I was just going to say, women are traditionally believed to be more intuitive than men. I don't know at what point in time that this became a catchphrase. What I can say is whatever we're seeing right now is the opposite of that. With world events, because a large amount of females were trolling me for more than men by far. We're talking a 9-to-1 ratio, Kyle, 9-to-1, for not getting behind the Bundy thing. And it's a 9-to-1 ratio that I also see the fake news being spread, 9 female to 1 male. Unless, of course, it's Islamic-based and more males because we can be a little bit more aggressive now more males are involved in that. Fake Islamic invasion posting, that fake tough guy internet stuff. And this doesn't necessarily have to be with putting down men or women. It's more or less a critique of what's going on cognitively and questioning whether there are cycles in time where people lose their shit and they're easily led by mainstream media. We're now in this age of digital technology and digital mass media mind control and this explosion in fake news. So, I believe that this is the first time in history that we're able to see the effect of fake news on millions of people, at one time. We're saying that an event happened and it not actually happening, perhaps a shooting, perhaps other people being behind a terror event, but yet a terror event being used to lead people to war. And more specifically to this case, the media being there at the press conferences in Burns, Oregon, and the whole nation watching these men. And that's what's interesting. You normally don't see that type of coverage for a real standoff where, there's a CNN microphone and an RT microphone. We've all seen it. That was kind of abnormal. And the FBI stands over there and they have a little press conference and the guys come out with guns that they brought up from their house in their car they drove through major highways and freeways with no one stopping them. So, what I can say in this, my closing comment on this point, it's a bad sign for the future because if people fall for this, they're going to fall for other operations. I guess one thing that could be said as a positive, only so many people took up arms and went up to the refuge.
Yeah.
There were only so many people. There may have been thousands saying, "Where are the real men? Stand up and go up there." While they and their family members aren't going up there.
Right, right.
So we saw in the end only so many Americans, despite the keyboard warriors, only so many went up.
Well, as far as like the further developments since what Shane and I have kind of mentioned jointly, there have been the court documents that have been released, and or as a different colleague of mine describes it, the paper chase regarding the C4CF guys. The only thing I really know at this juncture is that Shauna Cox, Sean Anderson. Oh, and by the way, Sean Anderson, that was the guy who was screaming about, kill the FBI, by the way. Yeah, that's that guy. Shauna Cox, Sean Anderson, and John Ritzheimer, of course, they're all out now. They've actually been out for a little while now. Now their trial, whether they're out of jail or they're still in like solitary confinement, at least for a few of them, the trial for all of them is sometime in September. And gauging from the court documents that have been released, the federal government is treating this primarily as a conspiracy case. There's no actual crimes they're charging them with, at least the guys that were at the refuge. I mean, remember, too, the court documents also reveal that with some of the defendants, they've added on charges for those individuals who were at both Bundy Ranch and at the Wildlife Refuge. And those guys are facing, what was it, something like the expected sentence is like something like 90 years or some real long estimate. But the fact of the matter is that just in terms of the charges, the indictments as they stand now, if somebody was involved with Bundy Ranch, they're in infinitely more trouble than the guys at the refuge. And just let me use one example real briefly just to kind of ram this home. Pete Santilli, legally, is in noticeably much worse trouble than John Ritzheimer is. It's not even funny, especially when you take the court documents for both of them and you compare them side by side. Like, Ritzheimer's is puny compared to Santilli. And you could say that you can kind of mix and match regarding all the different defendants, but that's what the court documents that have been released have said, is that the guys at the refuge are really only getting in trouble for conspiracy to impede officers or agents of the United States, and the guys at Bundy Ranch are facing the actual real criminal charges. So that's rather interesting, isn't it?
I just want to say this. I find it really hard to believe. It doesn't mean that I'm right. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. I have a really hard time with the idea of Pete Santilli being actually punished for anything. I hear what you're saying, and that is the narrative. That is the narrative. This is a war on free speech, the alternative media. Look at Pete Santilli. He's a martyr. Now, this has already been explained on shows like Vinny Eastwood, and you've discussed it, and others have discussed it, and I've discussed it. Pete Santilli's on-record history of calling for violence against the U.S. government. Another Mark Kessler. Oh, what a surprise. He actually used to interview Mark Kessler.
Yes, he did.
And just knowing like the history of his investigations and who he talks to and who he promotes and the people he's backstabbed as a real sociopath, as told by Vinny Eastwood in his mini documentary, The Untold Story of Pete Santilli. I stayed away from that guy. There's something that really rubbed me wrong about, have I mentioned in this podcast that every single video that I did was demonetized that talked about it being a psyops? Every single one, every video discussing Pete Santilli, there's about 10, 5 to 10, were demonetized. And this was before Pete was arrested. Pete would be the person to find out about the people talking shit about him, and say, fuck what this person do, whoever is helping him. And so we saw Vinny, for example, lose his YouTube channel multiple times, actually, because of Pete Santilli. You can't just file false copyright claims repeatedly. Eventually, you're going to be punished by YouTube. At least that's what happened with most of us. If you or I call for Hillary Clinton to be shot in the vagina, we're going to get more than just a friendly letter left on the door. There's going to be, especially if we're in the alternative media, there's going to be some problems. So this whole thing is just, and then there's some other points that I want to make, but I mean, yeah, the way that people were able to get behind Santilli was startling.
Yeah. And remember, too, that, and not a lot, I'm just going to do this one off the top of my head, but not many people may remember that only, 1 or 2 months right before the statist turf war kicked off on January 2nd, Pete Santilli had John Ritzheimer on to talk about, to use the derisive term I've heard in private conversations, and I've mentioned it publicly a few times before, but quote-unquote, them muzzies. So that's just kind of, in terms of how these relationships work between some of these characters, as well as the types of things they talked about, when they talked about them, the chronology. In other words, there is very much forethought and planning, and dare shall I say, Alex, politicking with a K. And so when I went public, when I did, about the neocon infiltration of the Patriot movement, I actually did get ostracized from some circles, by the way. I don't think I've mentioned that publicly before necessarily, but definitely in private conversations with some other folks I've mentioned it. I might as well mention it publicly now, that I'm getting a lot of crap. But I really try to kind of play it on the down low because I don't find it particularly important, but maybe it'll be important for other people. I don't know. There's something else I did want to mention, though, and this is a further development of the statist turf war. Now, this is kind of this is more of an element that really has been kind of mostly ignored. It's publicly known, it's just more obscure. But this was something that was mentioned in the joint article I wrote with Shane Radliff, which was entitled The Origins of the Harney County Committee of Safety. And Shane and I were able to demonstrate that there actually was some, let me put it this way, Ammon Bundy facilitated the founding of the Harney County Committee of Safety on December 15th of 2015. Like, he was actually there. There's footage of him actually coordinating the voting for establishing the Committee of Safety. And why that's significant is because later during the statist turf war, the Committee of Safety actually publicly requested Ammon and the other C4CF guys, Citizens for Constitutional Freedom, they called themselves, to depart from the refuge and let them, meaning the Committee of Safety, take the lead in terms of conducting any sort of political activity against the government. And obviously we all know that Ammon disregarded them. So think about that little weird coinky-dink. He helps facilitate the establishment of them, was actually there the night it was formed, and then basically betrays them later when there is public attention and there are decisions to be made in a serious manner. And then he just basically flips him the bird. So isn't that a fascinating coinky-dink?
Absolutely. And a couple more final statements on this, and we'll come back in the future and probably do an update on what's going on with the court cases. We definitely want to follow where the court cases are going to go. I want to say this first. There was a real shift of power from organized crime to organized theft via banking, I would say, from the 70s leading into the 80s, leading into the 90s. And now banks, big banks, have been caught running drugs, laundering money, loaning money out to people even if they can't pay it back, only to take back everything. So we've really seen the big banks pick up the job of the old Italiano mafioso groups and families that some of us may have read books about as a child, like Wise Guy, which I did. And there was a period where those books were trending, before everything was about the banks. It was mafia. So the Witness Protection Program took in those people that they made, stooge pigeons, and all these books actually came about in the aftermath of the very, very, very first mafia men who talked to the FBI. That's where the books began, and all the stuff came out as to how the families are run. What's going on with this and these men sitting in jail? I feel another Witness Protection Program, because right now the big buzz isn't mafia. It's we got to go after the liberty movement, although they don't call it that. They say the right wing or the patriots, and they actually lead people to some of these racist ideologies, so they have the pretext. For those that love whole problem, reaction, solution rant, I don't see a friggin' better example, Kyle, than this.
Yeah.
This is problem, reaction, solution.
It is.
John Ritzmeier, next topic. This guy was the main ringleader at the beginning, not so much Pete Santilli. He came afterwards. John Ritzmeier, however, was very busy. Yeah, the muzzy, the Muslims, grenade launchers and shit out in the desert. And where is Blaine Cooper? So you have Blaine Cooper on his channel and this video. Social media, YouTube doesn't shut it down. It gets hundreds of thousands of views. I don't know if the Oath Keeper promoted John Ritzmeier's, suicide mission talk.
No, they disassociated. No, I know what happened. They disassociated from him. Actually, I know what happened. They specifically rebuked him.
Okay, I think that's what I found. I remember now, because that's when I found out about the whole thing. I found out about the Oath Keeper saying, no, we're not a part of this. Then finding John's video. Then recognizing Blaine Cooper. Blaine was previously featured apparently on AM TV Media for calling out McCain. And at that time, by the way, if you look at Blaine now compared to then, dude, I know what it's like to pump iron and not pump iron. It's not that much of a difference. Dude looks like he's on roids, actually. He does not look naturally buff. He looks extreme. He looks like he's ready to go on stage. And there are some videos of him really pumping out the 4 or 5 plates. Now we're talking 10 reps, just like that. So something's not quite right about any of these characters. And the one thing that united all of them was their acceptance of the demonization of innocent people, also known as Muslims or Middle Eastern immigrants. This was not seen before. And just 2 years ago during Bundy, which was 13 years after 9/11, most of those people there were not ranting about the Islamic invasion. Maybe about Obama being a closet Muslim, but that's about it.
Well, I will just say this, because there's also been another development I did want to mention at least briefly. The sovereign citizens and their craziness, they've actually been attempting to co-opt the establishment of committees of safety for over a year now, well over that. There was what I wrote about before. One group of them basically tried to hijack William Wolf's lecture on committees of safety January before last. And then their more recent attempts, actually the more recent attempts have been by an organization known as the National Liberty Alliance. And Shane wrote a different article last month all about how they were trying to do that. And there was one example or two examples worth mentioning. Apparently they have a registry, so-called, and Alex, you'll probably love this, one more fake thing to throw in the pile. It is a fake registry. And this fake registry is of supposedly the committees of safety that have been established. And Shane pulled off a great experiment. It was wonderful. What he did was that he registered on the fake register a fake committee of safety just to prove, with screenshots and such, that the entire registry is faked because nobody is vetting the information being submitted to the registry. So Shane completely proved it, I think. So yeah, there is no committee of safety in Fayette, Illinois. It is completely bogus. But according to the National Liberty Alliance, it's legit. And Shane did a brilliant way of demonstrating that. So there's very much this. It's not just demonization. It's also a co-opting. Oh, that word again, right? There's very much a co-opting of any attempt by the constitutionalists, as they would see it, to restore their constitutional republic, whatever the hell, through committees of safety, which is what the founders did. And I've written and spoken about committees of safety multiple times before. And unfortunately, there are vested special interests who are interested in either muddying the waters or otherwise co-opting it for their own purposes, whether it be John Deresh's NLA or the fake judges that I've written about separately. So there is this weird, I guess you could call it infighting to a certain degree, but there's really much this, balkanization between the sovereign citizens against other types of, well, for lack of a better term, activists, regarding, what to do and all that. So, for people who may not know a lot about this kind of material, or who otherwise are kind of scratching their heads wondering, why hasn't the government been reined in yet? Why hasn't anything good happened for restoring liberty? Well, part of the reason is that you have other disingenuous activists like the sovereign citizens or the fake judges, or pick a term, who are actively co-opting and demolishing and otherwise bastardizing forms of organization that actually have historically worked, whether we're talking about the American Revolution in the 1770s or, as I like to point out, the Texas Revolution of 1835. So that's kind of where it's at right now, and it's being documented. And one other thing, too, about the NLA. Shane also wrote that part of what the NLA does, they like to do the whole fakey citizens grand jury thing. Well, Shane was actually able to get a screenshot from one of the dockets that's on the federal government's PACER system, and apparently the NLA was trying to file these phony documents regarding the C4CF defendants. And what's rather interesting is that the screenshot that Shane managed to get was dated May 10th of this year, where essentially a decision was made that none of the documents from NLA or any of their subsidiaries, I guess you could say, are going to be accepted in the court cases regarding the C4CF guys. So isn't that rather interesting? You have all of this weird co-option, whether it's Bruce Doucette and his craziness with the fake judges, or you've got the NLA. And one other thing too, Alex. Remember, the NLA and the fake judges, they hate each other. They're actually two different factions. And of course, both of them hate me and Shane and others in the alternative media. I mean, hell, even Maggie Rose has been getting a lot of crap because she's a little bit more moderate, but she's been getting a lot of crap for even questioning the efficacy of their methods. So, that's rather fascinating, isn't it?
Absolutely. And for those that don't know, because there's going to be a lot of people that are going to tune into this, that have never heard about Costilla County, we, both you and I, a lot of people don't want to touch the story. You know, it wasn't interesting enough, and that's how we met, kind of intersected on the same story. Mm-hmm. We caught wind of this whole fake judge movement that people still aren't really talking about. And we noticed it first in Costilla County when Bruce Doucette showed up. What was happening in Costilla County, for those that never heard of it, a place where people used to live in their RVs for years and years, off the grid, desert, got to haul your own water. You just got to survive the elements and your crazy neighbors. But for the most part, the county stayed away. Well, that changed when I went back to Costilla County the second time in 2015. You know, within weeks of me returning, got wind of the changes to the land use code. So we're dealing with a real property rights issue, but there were no cows involved. And I don't know if the fact that we weren't making enough hamburgers, we weren't saying, come on down, we'll have a cow. And it sounds like a joke, but folks, you know, people act like they care about freedom and liberty. They came to the aid of the Bundys. You know, we saw the microphones get out for the takeover of a wildlife refuge. Complete silence when you have people being kicked off property they own. You had a lot of people just being armchair quarterbacks leaving YouTube. Well, you should do this. Well, you should do that. How about you people help us get the story out? Okay, and just, you know, enough with the rudeness. You should. You should all declare yourself sovereign citizens was the next thing that started to come up. Now, I've been involved in the alternative media for years. I've never seen just a bunch of people run around at the same time going sovereign citizen, sovereign citizen, sovereign citizen. We have people claiming to be sovereign citizens supporting Anna von Ritz, another fake judge. And we have Anna von Ritz saying sovereign citizens are an oxymoron. So what are you doing? You know, you're saying these people are not sovereign citizens, but yet they support you. And what was Leanne Hall's emails doing in my junk box, my junk inbox? Somehow or another, my email was added on to a massive junk spam thing going back to Leanne Hall, tied in with this whole thing. So, you know, we saw them drop the ball in Costilla County, and people that could have got, actual legal support from an actual lawyer that actually knows the law, that can actually countersue Costilla County because of things they have actually done that are actually illegal, enforcing codes multiple times before they've actually passed them. Telling people to stop filming, what, in a public building? ACLU was not interested in even that. And anyone listening wanting to see video of this going, this sounds interesting, type in Costilla County on YouTube. Find my playlist, go to Kyle's site, blastbastille.com, and read through his reports on Costilla County, and you'll get the overall picture. And compare those reports with the two paragraphs in the mainstream press. Like barely even like discussing what this is really about. A corrupt, likely cartel-connected, Hispanic, mafia-like family controlling that region. And I say that word mafia loosely. They're probably more connected to the cartels. There was major anger that marijuana growers were moving into the region. I had the feeling, Kyle, that they were afraid or angry that other people were cutting in on their business, to be frank with you, because they're not really taking in that much water. I mean, the real water loss are the alfalfa farmers. You know, the massive big farms. They're out there in Costilla County. You know, the big old pipes laid out, the complete waste of water in Monsanto GMO. You know, like that type of field where you probably don't want to live next to it. In the end, I'm glad I'm no longer in Costilla County because I'm starting to wonder why all those people there are a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But what we saw was a potential attempt on the part of the government, and I'll talk about why briefly, to see if they could radicalize Costilla County. And this was several months before Burns, Oregon. So the people that supported Burns, Oregon, as well as the people that are kind of, you know, questioning where all that was going, they should know about Costilla County, which was the revolution that never was, the train that really couldn't. And so, you know, as the winter came in, you know, and things got cold in Costilla County and a lot of us left, you know, all of a sudden this whole thing started to emerge in Burns, Oregon, which was probably pre-planned by multiple months. You know, I remember posting Eamon Bundy's video on amtvmedia.com when he was asking for help initially. But even then, you know, I saw like a look in his eyes, something of the way he talks comes across like very counterfeit. You know, the deliberate, soft-spoken cowboy who's just almost a little too relaxed for a potential standoff situation. He was just a little bit too relaxed, Kyle, that nothing would go wrong as he played his role, his messianic role. I mean, God talked to him. Again, no. We're not supposed to get, we're not supposed to call them Al-Qaeda, even though they got a suicide mission and they're talking to God. Oh, no, that's really, really offensive. And so with the Costilla County thing, all of a sudden, just like that, we have people like Devin Pinion writing about the white supremacists and the sovereign citizens, and I'm really offended at his writing. But then I looked a little bit closer, and then I saw all the amount of people getting on board this whole, the Muslims are invading. So from his perspective, yeah, he's looking at white supremacists. His mistake was confusing me with them. But was he somewhat accurate when he went to Roger Marsh's page and said, look, these people are fucking getting behind this dude, Roger Marsh. I went to this dude's page and his buddy's page and look at what came up. So he writes this long article about the white supremacists. Dude, these are outsiders. Who knows where they came from and if they're working for the government. My next point, probably the most important point. Inner Bruce Doucette, who I don't believe that is his real name. I don't believe that he has a computer company in Denver that's making him six figures. So no one questioned Bruce Doucette, really, and pushed it forward. Okay, so it looks like he's written his whole, I'm a Superior Court judge with a friggin' crayon. Not literally, but he might as well have written on paper with a crayon, toilet paper. I am judge, me sovereign citizen, judge. Okay. Somehow or another, that bullshit worked with people like Jeremy Costley and others in Costilla County. That to this day, even though he's done nothing to help them, there are actual human beings, we believe they're humans, at least, that are not questioning Bruce Doucette and or trying to find out, why is there no background information on Bruce Doucette? I don't believe there is prior to this year. You are the first person to even look out of curiosity and go, it seems that all these self-appointed judges just declared themselves judges or created their own paperwork in the same year, citing Anna von Ritz and Bruce Doucette, perhaps a few others, in the year of 2015. Mm-hmm. That is a coincidence that the average thinking person, if they are thinking, cannot look beyond.
Right, and actually, speaking on that one point, there's been actually some further developments about some of that stuff. We'll see if I can at least hit on a few of these here, at least briefly. I actually found the full fake oath, and if you don't mind, I would like to read at least a portion or a bit of it, just to give you a flavor of just how fake and phony this is, and what, unfortunately, some people fell for, if you don't mind.
Sure thing.
Okay, so now I did repost it in full on my blog, but and there's also different versions, right? There's the so-called fake grand jury administrator. There's also some other equally fakey thing. But let's just focus on the fake judge. So what they call the fake judges call themselves the Superior Court Judge for the Continental United States, and that's a capital N small u because that makes a difference somehow, for the Continental United States Oath of Office. So just a segment from this. All right, here we go. And also, right before I get started, keep in mind, this is fake, okay? This is not real, but do keep an eye, but for the listeners, just pay attention to the wording. Fake oath, here we go. I blank, a natural man/woman, living and breathing, and standing upon the land, and not a creature or subject to or of the holy sea/law of the sea, do hereby attest and affirm that I seek the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, in all matters, seen and unseen, known and unknown, real or imagined, tangible and intangible. I am the warrior protector for those who know not how to speak of the crimes against them. I bear true witness for those unable to defend themselves. I educate and inform those whose eyes, ears, and minds are open, receptive, and ready to see, hear, and think, should it be their choice to seek these freedoms for themselves. And I'm going to skip a little bit into this, and then this one's actually particularly important.
That's a lawyer I want on my case.
Yeah, exactly. One more segment from the fake oath, because this shows the arrogance. I have jurisdiction in all matters of all states and estates, nations, and countries, where oppression, tyranny, suffrage, peonage, barratry, piracy, slavery of any type, involuntary servitude, antitrust, monopolizing, terrorism, exploitation, blackmail, extortion, wrongful detainments, and internments for profit have been alleged and or charged. Now it's that first part. I have jurisdiction in all matters of all states and estates, nations, and countries. I don't know about you, Alex, but that sounds like a New World Order to me.
Now, there was a claim that was made to both of us. We have not verified it, that they are claiming that their power derives from the Vatican and or Rome and or the Pope. Did you hear this alleged claim, and have you found any potential that it could be something that they are claiming, where their power comes from?
Okay, okay, let me clear something up. And just before I explain what happened here, the sovereign citizens, and more specifically the fake judges, there is so much blasted nuance and minutia that it is very easy to get confused. So I'll try to keep this as simple as I can. But yeah, just for the listeners to keep in mind, the sovereign citizens like to confuse people, whether they mean to or not. What happened is that the fake judges are claiming that the Vatican is trying to conquer the United States, at least in some sense. So they claim they are opposed to the Vatican, but that's kind of rather interesting, isn't it? Because I know the Vatican has been accused of engaging in global governance. Sometimes the Pope will even say, I favor a one world government or something to that effect. But that's rather interesting, isn't it? Especially when you contrast it against the fake oath, where they said, just like I read a moment ago, I have jurisdiction everywhere on this planet. It's like, wow, that almost sounds like George W. Bush's, global war on terror, where the entire world legally is a battlefield, according to the White House. So it's like, wow, geez, which side are the fake judges on? Really, if you think about it. Just gauging from the wording from their own documents.
Exactly. Well, we have definitely covered more than other alternative media sources are covering on this particular story. But if there are, and I'm speaking to the audience members, other reports that either myself or Kyle should know, other information that has come to surface, other than just, the same old YouTubers repeating the same old thing, but perhaps a quality report full of dialogue and information, leave it down below in the comment section. The second thing I'm going to say is, if you start seeing people in your neighborhood, suspicious individuals, people claiming to be judges, let us know. Let us know if this is something that is erupting or evolving. This is something that perhaps we've exposed and it may go away. But we have noted a very interesting pattern of the coordination of the many fake judges arising and declaring their oaths in 2015, and the fraudulent nature of this. And we ask ourselves, how are they making their money? What would motivate someone to act in a organized fashion with other so-called judges? So Kyle's website is thelastbastille.com. My website is alexansary.tv. My email is alex_ansary@hotmail.com. Like the police say, if there's a missing child, if you have additional information, please contact. Well, we're not the authorities, but we are the researchers and some of the few on the earth itself, actually. As crazy as it sounds. And that sounds crazy. If you have additional information on this fake judge movement, let us know. Kyle, thanks for doing this podcast with me.
Oh, thank you for having me on. Appreciate it, man.